Good morning. Welcome to AP Computer Science A. Today, we are going to be covering section 2.5, using constructors. So you should have your notes ready to go. You should also have your Replit open in section 2.5. Be sure to write your name. Make sure that you are also clicking on submit once you are done so you can get credit for this assignment. Today, we're going to be talking about constructors. Now, we've actually used constructors since the second day of class when we declare and initialize a string. So, for example, if I say string school equal to Santa Fe, that's one way to be able to initialize and to declare a string. Now, on the last lesson, we actually talked about a different way of doing it by using the keyword new. This will do exactly the same thing. So if I go and print out system.out.println and I print school, the variable school, then once I print it, it'll give me something. Now, one of the things that you'll notice today is that we have other files included in here, which are circle, rectangle, and polygon. They're all Java. They're all three different classes that we're going to be using today. And in adhesive, we're going to import an entire package. In Replit, I want to be able to refer back to them. So instead of importing the package, we're just going to actually look at each of the classes themselves. And those classes actually refer back to what you have on your notes. So you should have your notes ready for section before 2.5. So let's go through. And I printed them out for you so you can have as a reference as you guys are working through some of this code in this unit. So notice there's the regular polygon class. Then we also have your rectangle class. And you also have your circle class. I'll be using the notes as well. So for now, where's my 2.5? Let's keep it in this section here. So therefore, every time we want to make sure that you guys are always on the main and don't mess up with other code because otherwise it's going to give you lots of errors. So every time that you use the new keyword, that means that you are calling a part of the class, a part of a code, which we call the constructors. Now, if you go into, one of the things that we did last time, we went and searched for the string class Java, and the one thing we want to select is the Oracle one. So if I click in here, it's going to give me all of the methods, constructors, and if we go further down, you're going to see constructors. And those are the different ways that we can actually construct a string. But for now, you don't have to worry about this. But we've actually used it from the very second day of class. What's another time that we've used the keyword new? Correct. The other time that we use the keyword new is when we use the scanner class, correct? So every time you use a keyword new, you call in the constructor, and that process is called instantiate. You are going to instantiate the variable. You're going to be calling the constructor, and you're going to tell it how you want it to be constructed, right? We want the variable school to be constructed with the letters SANTA space FE. So you're giving some information so they can actually construct what you want. Today, we are going to be using the class circle first. So let's look at the documentation for circle. Now, if you go into any of the, and I'll give you guys a link. If you go into any of the lessons or adhesive, if you click in here, now that will take you to this description. where it's going to give you the description of each of the classes. In this case, this is the description of the polygon. They give you the description for each one, or the regular polygon only, since you're using that. But they also give you the description for the circle. If we go into, and I'll give you guys the link. The link actually, it's bit.ly/ and Java section 2.5 to make it a little shorter. Never mind. bit.ly Java section 2.5. There you go. So let me repeat it once again. bit.ly Java section 2.5. That will take you to this page where you can actually see the description. The same way that we saw the Java, the string with all the information in here, you can find it here. Where if you click on the circle, it's going to tell you the constructors that it has. It has two different constructors that we can use. That means that we can tell Java how we, in two different ways to construct a circle. One of them is just by not including anything in there, and the other one is by including a double. Now, if we go into, so those are two constructors that we're going to be using right now. This is the information, the documentation that they have. And we'll talk about more on the documentation later on in the class. Basically, that's the information that the programmers included for us to be able to know how to construct it, all the methods, and how to use the class. Now, if you go back into the replit, this is the circle class, and that will correspond to the circle class that I actually printed for you. And let's go through it and let's go and highlight two things. So this is the constructors. And it's going to tell us how to construct the circle. And we have two constructors in here. We have the circle with nothing in there. What's inside, it's called the parameters. So this is called parameter. Sometimes they call it a formal parameter. Sometimes they call it parameter only. Now this means that in here, there's no parameter. That means that you don't have to include anything inside the parentheses in order to be able to make a circle to construct it from the class. In this case, it tells you that you need to actually use a double from circle. By inside, it needs to be a double, and they give it a name rad. Now, you don't have to worry about this because this is what they're going to use to be able to set the radius for the circle. So in this case, we have two constructors, which correspond to those constructors that are here. So this is the actual code, and this is a summary of the code, and which you can also find in here is basically the same thing that I have typed there. I just a little more of the comments. So the first circle, and it tells you a little description. And then the second circle, that is going to take in a rad. So the parameter is a double. So now let's go back into our main file. So let's make sure that you guys are on the main file. And let's go and construct our circle. So the name of the class is circle. So we're going to say circle space. Now you want to give it a name. So how about C? Let's do C1 since we're going to do more than one. Equals. So the name of the object is going to be C1. Remember, an object is the same thing as the instance of the class. So sometimes we'll say object, sometimes we'll say instance of the class. It's basically the same thing. And we have to call new. As soon as you type in the word new, that means that's going to allow us to, it's going to call either one of those two constructors. Now, we're going to call that constructor first. So therefore, it'll be circle and nothing in there. Automatically, whenever there's nothing in there, it's going to say, oh, there's nothing to do. But the radius, it's already placed as a 1.0. So therefore, the radius that we're going to construct right now, because there's no instructions or any other information to type in, is going to give it as a 1.0. So therefore, if we print system.out.println, and I'm just going to print the variable. I'm just going to print the variable C1. Therefore, I'm going to run it, and it's going to construct and print out what we constructed, which is circle with radius 1.0. Now, in order to be able to print this, whenever you make a class, and we're going to be making our own classes now to Unit 5, in order to make a class, you have to tell Java what you want to print. In this case, they told Java that every time you print the variable C1, you want to include circle with radius 1.0, and the 1.0 corresponds to this 1.0. And because we did not give any information and we used this constructor, it did not get changed. And it's a lot of information to take in at once. But now let's go and make another circle. Let's go and say circle. Now if I say C2 equal to new circle, and I place it, it's going to call the same constructor. So therefore, now if I print C2, it's going to basically print another same circle, correct? Because we told it to use the same constructor. Nothing changed. But if we want to be able to use the second constructor, according to the, and we can either refer back to this, or you can refer back to the circle documentation, tells you create a circle to specify radius, which is the red. Now, the only thing that we need to type in is in here, it tells us that we need to be able to include a double. So therefore, what size do you want it? It has to be a double. So let's say 2.5. Perfect. And now when we run it, in this case, this line, this constructor is going to, the new is going to call that constructor, which is the first one. So therefore, the first circle will be 1.0. The second time that we construct a circle is going to use the word new, but now it has 2.5. Java is going to be able to say, hold on, it's asking again to construct a circle, but now it's giving me a double. So Java is going to say, well, I can't use this one because this one is not taking anything in. Therefore, it's giving me a double. So therefore, it's going to use this one, and it's going to set your radius to the one that you wanted, which is 2.5. Whenever you have more than one constructor, that is called overloading. You are overloading the constructor. So basically, this and this are almost the same, but it has different information. This is called the signature of the method. So we have different methods. This is one method. This is another method. This is another method. And as you go through your notes, and we have one method here, another method here, another method here. So notice that they all start with the public, and there's a segment, a section. For now, we're just going to be using the constructor, and as we go on to the next sections, we're going to be using each of the methods. So that is the circle class. Now, there's another class that we have that's called the rectangle class, and I've also provided you with the documentation. It's in here as well. So notice that in this case, we have, how many constructors do we have? Rectangle. So one of the things that, that's not constructor, that's the name of the class. So one of the things that you'll notice is that the name of the class is rectangle, and the constructors also must be named the same, rectangle. So that's how I know that it's the constructor, because it has the same name of the class. And then we have 1, we have 2, and we have 3. Now, if we go back into the documentation for your information that they give you, we go back. We go back. And I go into the rectangle. It should give me 3 constructors. 1, 2, 3. And those correspond to the constructors that you guys have on the next page. And let's go and label it. Let's go and circle. This is the name of the class, rectangle. So therefore, that's one constructor, that's two constructors, that's three constructors. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2. You can have as many constructors as you want. There's no limit. But they all have to have a purpose, correct? So this will tell us how to be able to construct a rectangle. A rectangle can be constructed without giving any type of information. And according to this, it's going to create a rectangle with a length and a width of 1.0 because those are the initial values. A rectangle can also take in a double, such as here. Notice that the length is going to be given to both. So therefore, if they both are the same, it creates a rectangle with the length and the width of a given, which means that that's going to be a square, right? And now, if you type in 3 numbers, my finger froze. Sorry for that. It's going to freeze it. Give me 1 minute. Okay. So therefore, if we actually give it 3 numbers or 2 numbers, the length and the width, so this one takes only 1 double. That means it's going to set the length and the width to the same length. So it's going to be a rectangle, square. But then the last one takes in both the length and the width. So it creates a rectangle with length and width of the given values. So there are 3 different ways that we can construct a rectangle. So let's go over to our class we have. And now, remember that you want to type everything into the main class. Don't mess with the other ones here. We'll do that in Unit 5. Now I'm going to delete this. And now let's go and create a rectangle with no sides. So remember that we type in rectangle is the name of the class. Then give it a name, rectangle 1 equal. The keyword new was going to instantiate the variable. It's going to call the constructor rectangle. And I know at this point you're saying, oh, why do we need to do rectangle? Rectangle, we'll cover that later. I know we're covering pieces here and there. Everything will build up to a little, by the time we finish the class, you'll have a full understanding of all the components. And now we're going to not include anything. Remember that if we don't include anything, that means that we are going to use this constructor, which has nothing in here. So it's not going to change either the length or the width. And if we print it, system.out.println, then print R1. When they typed in when they made the rectangle, they told them why you wanted to get printed. We don't have to worry about this right now. It's going to print rectangle with length and width. So whenever you create your own class, it's going to tell Java why you want. Every time they print a variable, you're going to tell it why you want it to get printed. In this case, that's what they chose when Adhesive made that class called rectangle. But you'll be doing that in chapter or unit 5. Now, there's another way to create a different rectangle by just giving it a new rectangle, and we can give it a double. So let's say 4. You can say, hold on, Diaz, that's not a double, that's an integer. Well, integer are smaller than a double, so you can treat it, it's still be fine. Now, if it was requiring, if it was an integer, and we'll cover that in a second, then it'll give you an error. But if you type in 4.0 or 4.5, and it was expected in integer, then you will get an error. But for now, it should work fine. Let's try system.out.println R2, and let's print it out. Let me just print it. Correct? So that worked out fine. So now we said, according to the documentation and to your class, is going to set the length and the width to the same. So now rectangle say square. But we do have another way to construct a rectangle using the third constructor. Then we can just give it a 3.5 and 4.2. Whenever you give it two doubles, then it's going to be calling the third constructor, which the parameters are two doubles. Now, these ones are called arguments, the ones that you give in, and these ones are called parameters. Sometimes they call it actual parameters and formal parameters. Though they go back and forth. So if you call parameters, for me, it's fine, but these ones are called arguments. These ones are called parameters. These ones are called actual arguments. These are actual parameters. And these ones are called formal parameters. I actually call them arguments and parameters to differentiate. Makes it a lot easier for me. But if you call the wrong things, fine. For now. Next unit I do, or by unit 5, you should be comfortable calling this arguments and this one's parameters. So therefore, we are using this. So therefore, when you print your third rectangle, we are going to run it. And it's going to set the length and the width. Notice that they have to be in order. So therefore, if you type in the first one is 3.5, that corresponds to length. And the 4.2 has to correspond to width. So this is called the signature of the method. And we are calling a different method every single time because Java will know which one to call by the information that you provide. So if you only provide one, it's I'm going to call this one because that one requires one. If you actually type in two doubles, it's going to take this one. And if you type in three doubles, which one is it going to call? Let's say and I'm going to run it. You say, hold on, there's no constructor that requires 3. It's going to give you an error. The constructor was not found. And no suitable constructor was found because there's no constructor that has 3 doubles. They only created one that has none. They created one that has none, 1 or 2. There's nothing that has 3. So no suitable constructor can be found. Questions? Now, let's go into the last class. The last class that we're going to be looking at is the regular polygon. And I include it in here so that we can see. Let's see, where's the name of the class? This is the name of the class. These are what we're going to call the variables, the fields. Then we have one constructor. We have 2 constructors. We have 3 constructors. We have 4 constructors. And notice that if we go into let me go back, the documentation, Italy, Java 25. So therefore, we're going to go into we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will correspond to the constructors that are in your notes that you can reference back to as we go into this unit. I think this might be important. I thought this one would be useful for you guys to have. So let's go and label it. The name of the class is regular polygon. So therefore, we know that this is a constructor because it has exactly the same name. So the constructors have to have exactly the same name as the class itself. But the signature is different because this one, the first one requires no It has no parameters. The second one takes in one parameter. The third one takes in one. And the fourth one takes 1, 2. Now notice that in this case, this one will take an integer and this one will take a double. So therefore, Java is going to know which one to call depending on the information that you give it. So if you give it an integer, it's going to use this one, which is going to set the number of sides to that. So therefore, if you type in 3, it's going to create 3-side polygon, which is a triangle. If you type in a 5, it'll be a polygon. If you type in a 4, it'll be a square or a rectangle. Well, it's a regular polygon, so it'll be a square. In this one, it's going to be able to set the length of the sides. But let's go to the documentation. According to this, if you type in a double, it's going to create a equilateral triangle with the given side length. If you type in an integer, it's going to tell how many sides. So Java is going to know which type of regular polygon you want to construct by the information that you provide, whether it's no parameters that it takes in, one, I'm facing backwards, right? One double, one integer, or one of each. So let's go and use it. Let's go into Replit. And let's go and delete. Well, first, we need to make sure that we go into our main. Do not mess with all those files that you have there. So let's go and type in, let's go and create a regular polygon. So we're going to type in the new regular polygon. And then we're going to give a name. So P1 is equal to new. That's going to call a constructor. That process called instantiate. And now it's going to be regular polygon again. And now let's not give it any information. And according to the documentation, it's going to create a regular polygon with 3 sides and the length of 1 because we're not changing any of those 2 variables. Let's go and print it out. System.out.print ln and Q1. And that is going to run it. And print. This is what they told us to. So therefore, there's a method in the regular polygon that we'll go over later on that will tell us what to print every time we print the variable. You're going to get to this side, equilateral triangle with side of length 1 from 0. So now let's go and construct another polygon, and let's just give it let's do the integer first. That will determine how many number of sides. So let's go and do regular polygon, spell it correctly, this. P2 equal to new regular polygon. And if we don't give any information, it's going to construct the same exact one, right? So let's try. So let's go and just print regular polygon or just system .out .print and then P2. And I'm going to print out. Well, it's going to be exactly the same one, right? But if we want to call the other constructor, we want to be able to give it the number of sides. Let's going to give it to 5. Then it's going to set the number of lengths to 5, or the number of sides to 5, because we're given an integer, which is a hexagon. And let's see, how many did they program? Because they have to program everything there, right? 7. Heptagon. And you can actually see, if we actually look in here, you can see how many they actually program. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Let's say 15. How many, what is it called if you call a 15-sided figure? So you have to program all the information for it. It doesn't happen just automatically. You have to tell the computer what you want it to print every time they construct a 15-sided figure. Isn't that great? Now, what if I just print 4 should be a square? Perfect. How about a 5? How about a 5.0? Well, hold on. What happened? 5.0 shouldn't be the same thing? No, because in this case, every time you type in a double, it's going to call the other constructor. Java knows that that's a double. Java knows that that's an integer. So if it's an integer, it's going to call this constructor with the number of sites. But if it's a double, it's going to be calling this, and it's just going to set the length to 5.0. So that means that the number of sites stays the same. The only thing that they change is this one here. And if we're going back to the documentation, that tells us if you only give it an integer, it's going to create a polygon with the number of sides. But if you only give it a double, it's going to create an equilateral triangle with the number of the given side length. So therefore, Java has the ability to be able to say that's 5. So that's good. That's going to be 5 sides. And I know that Java knows that only because it's able to match it to this one here, which is the number of sides. But E3 equal to new regular polygon 5.0. Therefore, it's going to call, let me just print the last one, E3, and then we'll have one more to do. Then you print it out. You notice that in this case, you print all 3. But it knows which one to call it by the signature. So it matches it. Okay, that one doesn't have anything inside. I'm going to call this method. And that means that's going to stay the same. If it has an integer, it's going to call this method because that's an integer. And I want to set the number of sides to the number that they give me. And if it's a double, I might call this method because that's going to match. Has to match each one. So therefore, let's try this one here. Let's try one more. We're going to give it a number and a double. So now it's going to be regular polygon before new regular polygon. It's going to be 5.0 and let's do 4.0. 4.0 and 3 or 7. And now I'm going to print it out. Let's bring it down so you can see the entire code. It'll be system.out.println before, and let me print it out and run it. And what happened? Incompatible types, possible loss conversion, double. That's right? This one's asking for an integer and then a double. So therefore, whenever I give it a double, I say, hold on. A double doesn't fit into an integer. You're crazy. It doesn't match. It has to match exactly. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Now, if they had constructed another constructor, if they typed another constructor that takes them backwards, then they'll be fine. But in this case, it says, I can't match it. There's no way for me to match it. I can't find the method that you want. Well, I can find something similar, but it doesn't match fully. So therefore, it has to be 7, 4.0. Let's say 4.2. Now, if I run it, then it should find it. You should be able to do it just fine. So therefore, things to be able to remember is that new calls a constructor. It's called, whenever you use the keyword new, it's called instantiate. There are 4 different constructors in this case, and that's called overloading. That means whenever you use the same name, but Java will have to determine which one to use by the number and the type of variables or parameters. And the arguments have to match. So therefore, if you just give it one integer, then Java is going to look all 4 and say which one has one integer and found it. And that's the one that is going to use to construct the shape, or in this case, the object, or the instance of the class. Object, instance of the class is the same thing. So we'll continue. We're going to continue working on this in the class. Something to keep in mind is that whenever you are using the class in Java in adhesive, it's going to be slightly different. So let's take a look at that briefly, and then we'll be done for today. So we have, which one? I think this one. So if you want to be able to look at the documentation, just click here. I'll give you the documentation that we looked at early on. Otherwise, you can type in, you remember where is it? Where is it? Otherwise, just open and type in bit.ly Java section 2.5, and that will take you to Oakley. Otherwise, you can just select the one that you're working with and to be able to see. You also have your notes to be able to see which documentation you have. Notice that you don't have the files in here. What they did instead, they actually placed everything in a package, and they import the package in here. This line number 4 is going to import all the 4 classes automatically. So whenever you call it, it automatically knows what to find. I prefer to do it this way for the notes. That way you can actually go back and refer back to it. You can do it both ways. So this will conclude the lesson for today. Please email me if you have any questions. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys